All right. Fantastic. This is January 14th, 2022. And we have a training tonight called Story to Script to Performance. How come I can't see my notes? Okay. So I have a fantastic quote from Anne Lamott, the famous author. She said, almost all good writing begins with terrible first efforts. You need to start somewhere. So start by getting something, anything, down on paper. A friend of mine says that the first draft is called the down draft. You just get it down. The second draft is the up draft. You start fixing it up. You try to say what you've been trying to say more accurately. And the third draft is the dental draft, where you check every tooth to see if it's loose or cramped or decayed or, God help us, healthy. So I think that's a good way to sort of start off here, is that we're going to start with a story. Now, I'm going to suggest that that doesn't necessarily all be written, and that very definitely the first draft, the down draft, might not be anything more than just a storyboard or a word, scramble, and we'll go from there. So a lot of times we get asked, how do we record the team's ideas versus suggesting or critiquing their ideas? How do we keep this pure, that it's just the kids? So it's okay to remind the team, a week later, a few weeks later, about ideas that they had and things that they liked, and writing those things down, in some kind of a notebook that you keep. The important part is that not just writing down the things that you liked that they said, but really getting their ideas down and not sprinkling in your own ideas. So you're not really supposed to say, oh, that one's a good one, or not writing down things you don't think are such great ideas. However, as you question the teams through, sometimes something that seemed like it wasn't much of an idea later might be something that can be incorporated in. So really, you're just sort of putting down what they say, what they do, what they think. And really, the older the kids are, they should be doing some of that scribing themselves. So everybody says a good story has a beginning, a middle, and an end. What the heck does that mean? A beginning and a middle and an end really means something more like this. And this is one of the handouts from tonight. We have a worksheet here. It's the beginning is, who are we? Where are we? What are we doing there? And when is it? So it's kind of just setting the stage, giving your audience, like they always say about a good news story, who, what, when, where, why. What's our starting off point, so that the audience knows where we're starting from, who we are, and why. Then the middle is where there's a problem or a conflict or a situation. It's the part where the team interacts with each other to make the situation, and then they have to come to terms with it. So something happens, and then what? And then what? So something happens, somebody does something that causes other people to have a problem with it. Their reaction is such and such. And then how does one or more people work to get it resolved? And it might take more than what's than, just two or three. And the end should be a slam bang finish. It resolves the issue that was in the middle, but hopefully in a clever or funny or thought-provoking way. And the end should be fast. And when you're using this kind of thing and practicing building stories in instant challenges, lots of times the end is the best place to start. Have an ending in mind. Where are we going to end up? How are we going to come together? How are we going to solve whatever the instant challenge asked us to solve? And then work backwards into, okay, well, what's the conflict that's going to get us there? And then now, what characters are we? Who are we? Where are we? So, so this is a worksheet, and it's one of the handouts, and you probably can't even hardly see it. So here's what I've been reading, and that is one of the handouts that's in the help or chat. Next, there's a fantastic handout that I got several years ago at a state level training. And it's Pixar's 22 Rules of Storytelling. And these are just great tips for a team manager to be able to help the team, you know, come up with your ending before you figure out the middle. Seriously, endings are hard. So I didn't make that part up about start with the ending. Here's the Anne Lamott. Finish your story, let go, even if it's not perfect, you know, come back to it. When you're stuck, make a list of what wouldn't happen next. I mean, so there's just really good tips in here that you can use to work with your team, that they can use these tips to help them build a better story. So I talked about this, you know, at the beginning, and another way of recording the team's ideas could be that you actually record brainstorming sessions, you know, in an iPhone video or something, and have the kids be able to come back to that. Throughout this training tonight, I'm going to suggest that there are times that it's really a benefit to make some video recording. And finally, when I was talking about using that beginning, middle, end worksheet with instant challenge, there is actually an instant challenge where your team is to present a performance in which each team member chooses one part and then combines it all to make a story. So everybody has a minute to write their choices, and then they have 5 minutes to put it all together to come up with a 2-minute you know, performance to the appraisers. So it's a pretty cute instant challenge where you can use that BME, beginning, middle, end, and help incorporate it into an activity. All right, so from a general story idea to a script. First of all, I really suggest using that beginning, middle, end as your outline. And then just pull kids up and start with a line and a response, and then the response to that to start, you know, so if you have your outline and then you start saying, okay, so how would you say who we are, where we are, what we're doing here? Well, you know, maybe our characters would act like this, and you know, the one who's obviously in the monster costume is gonna say, welcome to my monster home. Okay, so then what does, you know, who's the other character? Well, it's a you know, a little girl in pigtails. So what's she gonna say? What? I'm at a monster house? How did I get to the monster house? You know, whatever. So they're gonna kind of just go through and make up some possible dialogue. And sometimes these are gonna go down a rabbit hole and it's gonna be like, no, back up. You know, okay, we were here and we had some good stuff happening. And then insert stage directions, like she walks through the door, or he holds out his hand to shake her hand, or, you know, something. So it's a couple of lines and then some sort of something is happening either while they're saying it or in between saying lines, and then rinse and repeat. You just keep going with this activity to try to take your outline to having actual scripts. So then of each of your and then is going to need 2 or 3 of these, you know, couple of lines, a stage direction, couple of lines, a stage direction, you know, something moves, a prop gets picked up, you know, whatever it is, that moves our story along. If you want to go from your beginning, middle, end and actually put it into a storyboard, there are a couple of different ways to do that. I mean, you can, I just went online and Googled, and there are, you know, all kinds of different, from simple to complex storyboarding. But this was one that I found on Google that I think was just, you know, it was like the, where you add the 4 kids or elementary age in your Google search. And I found 3 or 4 that I thought were kind of cool. So something that might work for you. So here it is. We've figured out what our setting is. That's part of our, where are we? We've thought about who are the basic characters we have to have. And then we start, okay, so what happens? And then what? And then what? And now we have our crisis moment where we have to fix it. And then what's our, you know, slam bang finish? Our solution or our outcome. Another way to do this is sort of with almost like a flow chart. The training I saw where they were, you know, where I pulled some of this stuff from was, how are we going to tell a mini series in the time that's practically a commercial break? So, you know, you have a million ideas, you have a whole lot of stuff you want to have happen. You can't write a book and tell it in an 8-minute performance, right? So this strategy uses sort of blocks of time in a visual format, and you don't want dead air. So these transitions, these little arrows from scene to scene, they have to be thought through, and you know, what's happening in that move from scene to scene, from the then what's to the then what's. So how many scenes are we going to need to tell our story? You know, how many then what's, how many events? And you remember this 8 minutes includes that you have to set up. You have to move everything from the launch area inside the performance room to the, you know, stage area, the performance area in the room that the appraisers will, you know, the prep area appraiser will show you where those things are. And do you have any actual set changes during the performance? And if that's happening, if you know, if you're turning a backdrop all the way around from one side to, you know, side A to side B, or you have you know, strips of backdrop that, you know, that turn like a page, or you have you know, teams who have something on rolling you know, posts, that scene rolls in and then they keep rolling and it rolls to the next one. Maybe they're drawn, maybe they're painted on canvas. It may just be, you know, refrigerator boxes, and you have to move set pieces around. How are you going to deal with the dead air? And so sometimes there's some kind of intermediary dialogue that happens. You know, one character is saying, well, I guess I'm just going to have to go see what's out there in the forest, while the other team members are moving, you know, that set piece around. So that's one of these. That's where you have to make sure that you've thought about that as you're building your script, that things are going to have to move. People are going to be in costumes. Somebody has a costume change, maybe, all of those kinds of things. Okay, and then my big suggestion is, let's start making. So in the mix with this, you have to actually start with things, because first of all, You know, somewhere around Thanksgiving, Christmas break, we're now into January. There have to be costumes, there have to be set pieces and props. Costumes help develop characters. Our characters are more interesting when they have a costume and then begin to use that as their jumping off point to be the character. And we're going to talk a little bit about what that means. Same thing with props. If we know we have to have the Rising Stars Challenge this year has an important item that somehow in moving from one home to another gets broken or falls apart. And then they have to work on trying to figure out how to put it back together, and they have to use teamwork and creativity and good manners to do it. So in that scenario, we know we have a prop that has to be there and it will drive action and dialogue. So in our story scene from scene, you know, we know that we're going to have that prop. And then
Margaret, can I jump in for a quick second? We kind of work backwards, like you were saying. They already figured out what they want for the prop, and they're already working on the hot monster house. We're kind of working our way backward through.
Oh, cool! That's great.
Yeah, because I think that's like you're saying. You know, they're going to get ideas from, you know, their set and everything. I think. And
that's exactly right.
To it and all that stuff.
And I think because this is going to be recorded, let's wait to have discussion until after the fact. But
sure.
The other thing is that I think it's really important for team members, even very young ones, to sort of keep a notebook and to you know, have a copy of the storyboard or you know, the visualness of this to be able to think about it and work from. And to keep their ideas if they have ideas in the middle of the week, and hopefully they're their ideas and not, you know, mom and dad's ideas. But dialogue really can develop as the props and costumes start to come together. And so if you've written dialogue, if you've gone from that outline of the story to, you know, a hard and fast written dialogue too early, it's going to probably sound canned and unnatural. You know, it's a step in the right direction to try to, you know, start to put dialogue together for how are we going to move ourselves through the story. But really, completed scripts come from the kids walking through the storyboard as they complete their building, as they get their costumes, as they get their props, as they get their backdrop. It's going to flesh out you know, if you sort of start with that theme, with the setting and the characters and the props within the theme that are going to make an impact, you know, you want to sort of stay within the theme and the characters that make sense. And then you want to just keep adding details. And so as the team is designing and building their costumes and their props, they're going to interact with those items and they're going to have funny ideas. I mean, they're just going to off the cuff, you know, be working on a costume and say, well, he should say, you know, I look pretty funny in this or whatever. And it's like, oh man, let's put that in, you know, let's put that in our actual script. Let's take that. And it becomes more authentic and organic kind of. And let the performance take the script where it needs to go. To practice somewhat improvisationally. You know, you have it, like maybe not to have totally strict lines the first several times that the team is kind of figuring out if their story to script works with all the props and costumes. So as we start to sort of actually practice the whole thing, practice a little bit improvisationally until the team really feels like they have squeezed every nuance, every pun, every cuteness, every pathos out of their story and their stuff. And then when you feel like, I mean, so the first few times you go through the script with, you know, you're sort of having rehearsals, let that script be fluid. And you, the team manager, keep frantically like print it out in triple space so that you can do a lot of crossing out and, did you guys like that line better? Keep going. I wrote down last time you said this, that was really funny. Do you want to say that this time? Those kinds of things. Once they've really kind of improved it through and feel really good, it's like starting to be the same every time, then that's what you want to memorialize. You want to go ahead and get everybody on that same page, literal script at that point, because there won't be need for improv anymore. It's going to be solid, it's going to be tight, and that's when it's going to bring the house down. Okay, so the next part, at this point, what we've done so far is we started with a germ of an idea. We started with an outline, the beginning, the middle, and the end. We started to try to frame in dialogue and stage directions. We turned that into adding in the props, the costumes, the actual timing, making sure our scenes follow each other well, and that we figured out what our, what our slam bang finish is. So now it's time to go for what makes a performance, what turns a cute little elementary age skit into an actual performance that is memorable. I have some cool, this was a wonderful training I went to where there are some stage pictures, and obviously they are not DI, they are true productions, most of them. And there is a handout to go with these next slides. The handout is, there are activities to how to coach for performance. And then these frozen pictures that we're going to look at, here's an activity. So there's 5 different activities that after you were to show your team these next slides that I'm going to show you, and you talk through it with the teams, I think that they're going to really get an idea of how to take things to that next level. So first of all, part of it is, how do we move? How does a character move? Are they young? Are they old? Are they cocky? Or they're timid? Maybe elegant or lithe or athletic? Male or female? Maybe not even human or humanized? How do they sound for their age, for their demeanor, for their life experience? Is there an accent? Is there a use of language, like maybe somebody is very formal and hoity-toity, or like a valley girl? Or do they sound smart, or do they sound, kind of goofy? So being able to take a line out of a story, you've probably, read stories to your kids where there are different characters in the story, and you put on the accent or you read it dynamically so that it's interesting. That's what we're talking about, is these kids learning to be able to deliver their lines in an interesting way. And then the costuming and makeup, you want them to make strong and identifiable impressions. So if somebody is the Valley Girl, then they need to be dressed like that. If somebody is very formal, somebody is very old, their makeup needs to have, I could do really good aged makeup probably as a tutorial, it's wherever you see the lines, that's where a darker, a pencil line goes. So makeup, if somebody is the mom, they're going to have, different makeup than if they're the little kid in the story. If they're the monster, if they're an animal, if they're, an inanimate object, then the opportunities for, having their face and their costume integrate together can be really, really fun. What's important about costuming and makeup, sound, voice, language, and movement is that it has to be strong enough and identifiable enough that it really makes the impression. If I'm old, I better be hunched over. I better be craggy voiced. I better sound like the real old grandma and, move slow and have a hard time. And, you think about how the guy moved in the great movie Up, where he was just kind of took him a long time to get out of his big easy chair. And why is this little kid bothering me? And he was kind of gruff and grumpy. So there's lots of ways to look at different kinds of characters, on YouTube or film clips or something that can help the kids learn how to act, especially now in COVID when we can't take them to acting classes and that kind of thing. So,
Margaret, let me throw this in. I took I guess I was at a clinic one time where they were talking about exactly what you're saying. It's like how to be the character. And one of the things that I took away from that training was how to be an animal. And what she said was, kids have this idea that to be an animal, you got to like drop to the ground and be on all fours. Well, now like the appraisers can't see you and the audience can't see you. And she said, look, it's like easy enough to be an animal when you're standing up. And she, did this thing like she was a horse, and she did things like she was a monkey and stuff. And it's like, you didn't have to drop down, but that's what kids, I guess that's their thought process is like an animal's on all fours, so I have to be on all fours too. But it's like you can do that without being on all fours.
That's really true. And there are a lot of examples in, probably kids' literature and stories, cartoons and that kind of thing that do exactly that, where, they're whether they're animated characters or whether they are live actors in animal type costumes, that they're not slithering around on the floor. They are acting just like, but they have the animal characteristics, so that what do cats do? They bap at things that are, so watching how an animal moves and incorporating that in rather than specifically thinking they have to trot around on all fours. That's really good thought. Okay, so I'm going to show these stage pictures and we're going to sort of talk about each one of them. So where's the focus in this scene? What do we draw our eyes to absolutely first thing? The guy in the center?
Yeah.
Okay, can you see every actor in this picture? I mean, right this second, you don't. There's a guy behind, there's a guy on the floor over here. There's somebody sort of off to the side of the stage. Where is everybody pointing? Right to the main character here that's being evidently possibly pulled in two directions. So what do you think is happening in this story? I think some of them like him and some of them are afraid of him. And, maybe the guy in the back is saying, take him away. And she's saying, no, no, don't take me, don't take him away. Are any of the actors not open to the audience? In other words, is there anybody who's turned the wrong way, turned backwards? Nope. That's something that's really hard to sort of reinforce in young kids, is that they really, even if they're walking off stage, most of them is still facing out to the audience until the very last second. Are any of the characters pulling attention away from the focus in the scene? No, they're all pretty focused on this guy, right? And which character in this photo seems to be the most important in the moment? Well, we think it's this other guy. Okay. In our next one, who's the most important character here? What's the focus? Which guy is it? The guy in the plaid shirt?
Yeah.
Okay. And how do we know that? Why are we pulled into that? Every character's facing him. they are, you know, I don't know if he's trying to get away or something. But the action is all surrounding him. And even you see these people who are sort of turned away from the audience, and yet you still see a whole lot of them, right? So they're not really turned away. Okay, what's going on in this? We have Santa. Santa has to be the good guy, right? How do we know that this other guy is the bad guy? He's got a gruff demeanor. He's standing, you know, sort of puffing his chest out a little bit. There in the middle of the scene, we have an important character over here, and we have the bystanders over here. So something's coming to a head here. Is everybody turned out to the audience? Yep. See, this guy's actually looking backstage, or, you know, downstage, and yet most of his body is still, you know, 2/3 of the way out to the audience. Okay, in this one, a standing character is going to pull our focus, whereas everybody else is sitting down, so they're less important in this scene. Characters looking all at that standing actor, and we have people at different levels. That makes a good stage picture. Okay. Here's one where there's all different levels. So we have somebody reclining. We saw that in a couple of the very first one as well. So we have somebody up here on the steps. We have some people right down here at the table, and we have a standing character. So nobody's the standout character in this particular scene. This is just talking about, okay, how do we have a group scene where this might be one of those transition, nothing's really happening. This is between a then what and a then what. Maybe they're talking about what we need to do to get to our resolution. All right. Here we have using lighting for emphasis. Now, of course, in DI, you can't turn on and off lights in the room, but a team can use uplighting or have, you know, a light coming off of a backdrop or something that would highlight something. We've seen teams do things with backlights behind sort of a scrim. Obviously, we've got a levels situation here where the guy who's being very forceful here is up on the table and pontificating, and everybody else is just listening. So he's the influencer here. I love this idea, and we've seen teams do this lots of times, where there's a sort of a color theme, and that you know, one character either transforms to or you know, or multiple characters transform costuming to make a bold impact with, you know, by color or by fabric, or, you know, the sparkle effect, that kind of thing. I mean, obviously Auntie Mame is the very main character in this whole, this is probably the you know, end culminating, you know, right before the curtain. Everybody else is in black and white. So obviously she's larger than life and you know, more colorful than anyone else. So in the storyboarding or the script to story training that I took a few years ago, the sort of end point, or the let's, you know, the slam bang finish part, is never a dull moment. If you're gonna be sad, if the story is gonna be sad, if the impact of what the team is doing is thought-provoking, then make them cry. You know, it has to be well done enough that you know, that the dialogue has been fine-tuned, that it makes us feel those emotions. Same thing, if you're going to be happy, if it's going to be, so funny that they can't help crying, either way, bottom line is the way to get all the points is to make them cry. I thought that was pretty cute. I also wanted to address team choice elements and how much team choice elements are all about enhancing a performance, an overall performance. Team choice elements most of the time come from some prop or some aspect of the scripting, some piece of the story, or something that either that sort of happens and it requires having a special prop or something in the backdrop or something dramatic that is either visual or verbal or spoken or sung or emotive music, whatever it is going to come from something that was going on as the team was building the props and the story that takes on a life of its own. And it's not supposed to be integrations. Integration means that if you took that one thing out, that team choice element that the team has chosen to highlight, if you took it out, then the story wouldn't continue, maybe wouldn't make as much sense, certainly wouldn't make us cry. So integration means that it's so integral, so important to the overall story and performance that without it, there just wouldn't be impact. And speaking of impact, you need to make sure that that impact is from 15 feet away. In other words, that the appraisers and the audience, but who you really care to impress is the appraisers, are going to get the benefit of whatever, really any of your performance, but particularly team choice elements, because one of the pieces of scoring is how well it's integrated into the story. One of the pieces of the scoring is how creative is it, and then the third is how well done. So you're not going to get well done points if there isn't impact, and if that impact isn't visible and felt from a distance. Couple of other tips: if something's going to fall off, leave it off. If it has so much glitter that you leave a trail of glitter, that's too much glitter. But in other words, if something's too fragile, then either beef it up or try again. Duct tape and recyclables have begun to be sort of a little bit overused, like the costume that's out of Doritos bags or whatever. Maybe looking for other new, unique materials. Sometimes using one material in a variety of ways throughout. There was a team one time that everything was cardboard, but it was cardboard that was cut and layered, and their props were all monochromatic, but they layered things. So they had waves and they had trees and they had they had a house with a roof and all kinds of things, and all it was cardboard used in all different ways, and it was very, very surprising. And so, if there is something that can sometimes strikingly simple can be very surprising. Costumes need to be complete, not just sort of thrown together. If somebody is, as you looked back through those team pictures, you saw, the hats, the, gloves. If it's a grandma type, does she need a cane? Does she have silver hair that's pulled back in a bun? I don't think grandmas really look like that anymore, but our stereotype of what an old lady looks like is gray hair in a bun, fat, solid shoes, a belt around some ugly dress, that's what an old lady looks like. So really think about the details in costumes and props. And nothing so small that it can't really be seen. You know, if particularly with props, like there doesn't have to be so much detail that there's a fork and a knife and a spoon and a plate and a little cup. I mean, really, that stuff, it's going to take the team too long to put it on. And, you know, unless it's all glued in and it just, you plop it down on the tape, you know, on the, as the whole set piece. And then there's the whole, if it's going to fall off, leave it off thing. So have things be meaningful in terms of props, and to really set the scene and not overly detailed. So it's like two sides of this story, right? Props we need to know what they are, and they need to have enough detail. If it's a team choice element prop, and yeah, it needs to have dials and buttons and wires, and you know, then yes, there's a lot of detail. If it's you know, the rock in the corner and you have 7 rocks that tell us we're, you know, in a canyon, they probably just need to be kind of simple. And how do you know if your visual things are good? People are going to stop you in the halls and want to look at it. And people are going to ask you, when are you performing, when you're unloading or you're gathering and, you know, getting ready to go into prep area, they're going to want to come see you. So, I mean, that's a normal tournament year. This year they don't get to, but we're not going to really be gathering in the halls. But in general, and this is a training that hopefully will be out here for a few years and helpful to teams. And so when we do get back to lively tournaments, all in person, you know, it's really fun to walk the halls and look at what other teams have done. And I used to tell my young teams, let's go watch a few high school performances so that you can see what you can aspire to. And that's the same thing with, now that state is in Arlington, which is close to us, it's really cool to take your team and watch performances at state. I don't know what the situation will be this year with protocols or not, but in general, when you go watch teams at state, you see a level up from what you might have, you know, seen at the regional, because these are first and second place teams from all over the state. So they're going to up their game a little bit. And we can stop the recording.